She was born on December 10th, 1920 in the Ukraine as Chaya Pinkasivna Lispector. Chaya, just over a year old, along with her parents and two sisters, immigrated to Brazil in 1922, where her mother Manya had relatives. Well, a new place called for new names, so upon their arrival, Papa Pinkas became Pedro, her mother Manya became Marietta, sisters Leah and Tanya became Elisa and Tanya, respectively, and Chaya became Clarice. Although they were poor, Clarice remembers a happy childhood, unaware of their poverty. Now, being the youngest of the bunch most likely helped, as she was pampered more than her siblings. Now, additionally, she could not remember the starvation and torture that her sisters endured in Europe before they fled. Now, creative and mischievous, she was a gifted mimic by the age of 4. She would entertain her family with impersonations of her kindergarten teacher's every strict move to hilarious effect. She was a natural-born leader, boasting a host of friends at school, but was rather selective and bossy. She had to be the one to make up the games the kids would play. Before she could read and write, she invented, along with a friend who was somewhat passive, according to her, a never-ending story, one in which the two main characters would perpetually be brought back to life. Now, when she did begin to read and write, she would create little stories. One time, after seeing and being inspired by an unspecified play, she wrote a play of her own. It was called Poor Little Rich Girl, containing 3 acts spread over 2 pages. Well, unfortunately, she hid the manuscript and subsequently lost it. And she made submissions to the children's page of the Diario de Pernambuco, which on Thursdays published stories sent in by young readers. Incessantly, submissions were sent, but they wouldn't get published. Now, soon enough, she understood that it was due to her stories as opposed to stories from other kids, not starting with Once Upon a Time, or were not about fairies or pirates. Her stories were more rooted in reality. And these seemingly childish endeavors were far from simple pastimes, however. You see, over her happy childhood hung the heavy and terrible sight of her paralyzed mother, trapped in a foreign country, trapped in a rocking chair, unable to move or speak, slowly and painfully dying. She would naturally appear in nearly everything Clarice wrote. She felt a great guilt over the matter, thinking it was her birth that caused the paralysis, though this was not the case. Now, Clarice shared a memorable story about the carnival of 1929. It was going to be her first carnival since her mother's illness had kept everyone busy. In past years, she was only allowed to stay by the doorway until 11 with a bag of confetti and an ampoule of perfume to spray on the revelers. But this carnival was different. A friend's mother decided to dress her daughter in pink crepe paper and offered to make a costume for 8-year-old Clarice as well. And she would be a rose. However, just as she was dressed in crepe paper, with her hair in rollers and missing only her lipstick and rouge, her mother's health suddenly worsened. Chaos erupted at home, and Clarice found herself rushing to the pharmacy to get medicine for her mother. She would say, "I ran dressed as a rose, running, baffled, astonished, through the streamers, confetti, and cries of carnival. The happiness of the other people frightened me. When hours later things had calmed down at home, my sister did my hair and makeup, but something had died inside me." A year later, at the age of 9, her mother died. The disappointment she experienced taught her how worthless such poetic efforts were. Writing was the last thing that could tack a happy ending onto the end of a stubborn reality. The habit nevertheless stuck, and though she would search for justifications for these activities, she clung to a hope that there was something she could do to save the world. Well, 10 years later, tragedy struck again. It was August 1940 when her father Pedro had a mild health complaint that led him to a doctor. He learned that his gallbladder needed removing, quite a common surgery scheduled for the 23rd of August. In 1940s Brazil, any surgery was risky. However, his daughter saw no reason to be alarmed. Sadly, upon returning from the clinic in considerable pain, Papa Pedro died 3 days later at the age of 55. Now, after he died, the three sisters went to the clinic to speak with the doctors, but the doctors refused to see them and furthermore provided no answers. Several years later, Clarice wrote a friend, quote, "Once he said, if I were to write, I would write a book about a man who saw that he had lost. I cannot think about that without unbearable physical pain." More than a year later, in October 1941, she confessed to a friend her, quote, "great desire to prove to myself and others that I am more than just a woman. I know you don't believe it, but I didn't believe it either, judging by what I've done up to now. And I'm nothing more than potential. I feel a fresh spring within me, but cannot locate its source."